Hey everybody, welcome to TNM Coaching Unplugged and Zone to the Rich Interconnected podcast. So glad, joyful, and happy to be with you once again, and super happy that our viewership is growing. I was just talking to our production team, and we more than 100,000 subscribers right now, and we're going stronger and stronger. So first of all, I want to acknowledge and honor everybody who is following both of those channels, people who are sharing our content, people who are commenting and liking. It's really, really deep gratitude to everybody because of you, we create this podcast, and then it's so lovely, of course, as a podcast creators, to see that this is growing. So thank you so much for that. Today we have a wonderful, incredibly inspiring guest, Sonja Kresojevic. Sonja is innovation and transformation leader, coach, speaker. She has more than 20 years of experience and really interesting track record helping organizations build their innovation capabilities, creative mindsets, resilient cultures. She also worked herself in leading global companies. She has experience, as we said, through organizational change, fostering experimentation, enabling continuous growth and improvement. So she's somebody who really was in business. And I always love talking to people who were in business and then they moved out of business. They created their own practices. They become coaches, leaders, taught leaders as well. So this is something that Sonja is. Today, we're going to open up a different topics. Sonja and I recorded one of the business webinars for some of our clients, and we have intertwined, in this conversation. And here today, we're going to be talking about innovation. We're going to be talking about creativity. We're also going to be addressing a little bit of the well-being and inspiring you to become that best possible version of yourself, whatever your circumstances in life are, being a leader, being a mother, father, entrepreneur, somebody who's supporting other leaders. This is podcast for you. So, Sonja, thank you so much for coming and welcome.
Thank you, Zoran. So nice to be here with you today.
Yeah. So I was just saying that you have this diversity of the experiences. You came from business and then you move into something else. So I would love to kind of know a little bit more about you, if you don't mind. Just a few kind of personal questions to start with. What inspired you to move out of the business at this transition of your life when you were really fully engaged? What was something that nudged you to kind of transit into being more of the coach, leader, and entrepreneur nowadays?
An artist, don't forget that.
An artist, exactly. An artist as well.
Well, it's a good question. I think it's a number of factors. One is I had the burnout, which at the time I didn't even have words for. But, looking back now, I can understand that working 17 hours a day and not having any space or time for personal life or pleasure or things that really, fulfill my soul were not really the great way to go, especially if you're working in innovation. But then there is also hunger for learning. I think this is something that has defined me my whole life. This insane curiosity that I have that is always pushing me to understand, engage, learn new things, get really to the bottom of why and how we function as humans. And so I went on this, really in-depth learning journey and inner transformation of my own, which I'm still very much on, because I don't think we ever finish. And the more I was learning about myself, the more I was engaging with people in a different way, and more these other, avenues that you are mentioning have been opening up, because I have started to realize where the barriers were in me. And then some of my clients who I have been trying to help work in innovation space. And so I started to connect innovation with inner and personal transformation, with coaching. And then during COVID, art came into play as probably the biggest discovery of my life, and really showing me how limiting we are even in the space of imagination, how little we allow ourselves to go wild with our dreams and possibilities. And so now this is not just a passion, it's something I'm actively pursuing, constantly learning. I went from painting to now doing tapestries, and, I'm constantly going on courses, and I'm incorporating all of that into my practice. So I've felt for the last year like I was weaving and stitching myself back to life, and everything that makes me and that really makes me tick. And now I'm doing that with my clients as well. So it's a beautiful journey, I have to say. I can't hear you. Sorry, you must be on mute.
And I'm happy to hear that, in your soul journey, in your practice, that there was a pain point at one point in time. You mentioned that you were overworking yourself, you were pushing yourself too hard. And a lot of people who are listening to this in a current business environment do the same. And at one point in time, you decided that this was not fulfilling for your soul. I love when people say there was no fulfilling by my soul, because this is what we ultimately looking for. And then you were courageous enough to create a transition, to move on, to heal yourself, and to get into the space where you are nowadays. I think in itself, that's super inspiring and gives people permission to learn from your experience.
Thank you. And then one thing I really want to mention is I was in a job that I absolutely loved with every fiber of my being. So people don't leave jobs that they hate. People also leave jobs that they love because they don't have tools to navigate what the system that is not really designed for humans is expecting of us. And so in that constellation of things, although I was doing incredible things and I had an amazing team, and I'm so proud of all the work we have done, and we published a book about that experience at Pearson, a lot was missing in terms of how we show up in the world, where we put our energy. Is it okay for anyone on this planet to work 17 hours a day, to go to work sick? It was normal for me to, wake up with allergies. I couldn't see, go to emergency room, get injection, and go straight to the office. I don't think that's normal. I don't think this is how we become creative, how we really fulfill not just our potential, but potential of our teams and our organizations, especially if we want to talk about innovation. Innovation is not the process, and too many consultants out there focus so much on the process of innovation. But innovation is fueled by creativity. And for us to be creative, we need space. To go and play and be joyful and to mess about and to fail. There is no innovation without failure. And a lot of innovation executives I know are petrified of failure, right? Because it's personal. The whole sense of identity is wrapped into that. And so for anyone who is in innovation space that is listening to this, forget about the process and create space in which you and your teams can just go and play, spend more time in nature, create, workshops inside the organizations or outside, even better, outside of the status quo, where you can just go and play and see what you discover. One of the artists that I truly admire, who also comes from our part of the world, Marina Abramovic, when she used to teach her students, they will have a week-long workshop and they will work on all these problems. And on Friday afternoon, she would collect everything that's in wastebasket, throw everything else away. And what was in the wastebasket would be back on the table. And she'd be like, okay, these are the real ideas. The ideas that you were scared to develop further, where your inner resistance was so strong, you didn't believe in yourself. You should work on those. And this is the space we need to create, because the world is so much more than this black and white reality that we create. And especially in the organizations where we put so many rules around that innovation space that we stifle any creativity, any sense of possibility. Everything new we produce needs to fit the existing. Well, the new doesn't fit the existing. If we want to innovate, we need to create a new operating system in which innovation can flourish. And that starts with us. We need to heal ourselves first.
And I'm super happy that you're sharing that, because it's a strong challenge. Like I can already hear people who are, being within innovation space, or people who are simply having part of their job to innovate. A lot of the times when I coach leaders nowadays, they said there is a KPI in my job that I need to innovate the product, innovate the service, innovate customer relationship. There's a lot of emphasis of innovation. You're saying that the process is not where we need to go, because process can deliver to the certain extent, but it's not really the core of innovation. And what you're inviting people to consider is creativity. So within this domain of organizations, you work in organizations, how do you feel things can happen more creatively? Does it require courageous leaders? Does it require change of the system? Does it require people to show up differently? What do you feel it's necessary step for this creativity that you label as innovation to really flourish?
I think it requires all of that, right? It requires space, it requires permission, it requires a very different set of KPIs as to how we measure that. It requires giving up on immediate results, because for innovation to work, I think you need to fail. What was the percentage? 90% of time, the startups failed, the innovation ideas failed. So you want to create space in which you can recognize the 10%. So in my previous, innovation corporate world, I focused a lot on how do we create those organizational conditions. And we did focus a lot on the process in order to remove the barriers to innovation. So we created the innovation process in which you could get seed funding inside large organization. We worked with our CFO to ensure that the way we learn how to assess those ideas has changed in the rest of the organization. We created a culture of innovation. We trained teams, but much more. If I was back in that role, I would do even more around the creativity itself, because creativity itself is one of the key skills that we all need. World Economic Forum has been talking about it for years. Creativity, problem solving. We need that. And it's not just for artists. We need to teach it in business schools. We need to teach it in engineering schools. We need to teach it to kids from early age. They know, but we need to teach the teachers how to create that environment of more creativity. And creativity is very much connected to play. It's very much connected to permission you give yourself to get lost and not to know where you're going. And that is very much connected to your inner work, right? Are you able to give yourself permission to just surrender, to be lost, not to know what you're creating? When I paint, I have no clue, absolutely no clue what the outcome is going to be. I have no control over that outcome. And I want to share this beautiful quote from John Cage, who described his artistic process, because he was not just a musician and composer, but also a painter. And he said, when I enter my studio, everyone is in the studio with me. My art critic, my wife, all my friends. And then one by one, they start to leave. And this is the key sentence that he says. And then if I'm lucky, I leave too. And that means my ego leaves, my need to know, my need to control, my need for that to fit the narrative, the story that I am, running in my head, and that we in organizations collectively run, right? Oh, we want something new, but can it please work with this system and that system, and can fit this narrative and this idea of who we think we are? And, the more we talk about all the rules, the more we reduce that space of innovation to almost nothing. And what we now need more than ever is the breakthrough innovation in social sphere, in organizational sphere, in human sphere, not in technology. Technology is way ahead of us. We need to catch up with technology, right? We need to create conditions in which the operating system of our existence has been upgraded. I always talk about, imagine one of those old Microsoft, I don't even remember what they're called, back in the 80s, 90s systems, operating system.
For example.
Exactly. And you try to run the most sophisticated apps for your phone on it. Would it support it? Of course not, right? Of course it wouldn't. Well, our collective operating system in our organizations, in our society, is not for purpose anymore. And so this is a very challenging moment in which we find ourselves. We need to change that operating system, which is full of rules and full of agreements and contracts we have made with each other. And we need to start writing these sophisticated apps that are, solutions that are solving some of the problems that we have. But for that to be possible, we need to change. This is why we are investing so much effort right now in leadership development. This is why everyone I know has a coach or a healer. Going to shamans even is not a taboo anymore, right? We are constantly working on ourselves because our consciousness needs to change. Our ability to navigate the uncertainty needs to change. Our ability to create needs to change. We need to learn how to co-create with others without all the burdens that our ego are imposing of, it needs to fit my story. And I am going to defend that story, and then I'm not going to create anything new as a result.
So from your point of view, that needs to change, need to evolve. I think that's something that is really happening nowadays. As you said, everybody has healer, shaman, coach, consultant, guide. People are also microdosing on different substances. Even some of the highly esteemed executives that I coach nowadays are open to all different modalities of healing and consciousness evolution, because they understand they need to evolve. We all do. And when it comes to the point that we are focusing on today, Sonja, which is creativity and innovation, in order for somebody to really tap into their creative soul, into their creative body, what is the evolution, or what is the change that is needed? Let's say for somebody who is listening to you right now, who is working in an innovation team in the organization, or has the KPI or innovative or creating, and saying, I hear you, Sonja, I understand, I listen, and I'm willing to do the work. So what would be your kind of recommendation? What would you say that what is the change needed for somebody to really tap into their creative being and then express it full on?
I think most of the people around us are already doing something creative, but they're not doing that at work. When I speak to my clients, they're either playing an instrument, or they're painting, or, they love cooking, or if they're a woman, a lot of women are doing some of the, knitting, embroidery. So it's not unusual, but all of that creative work is happening outside of the organizations, because the 9 to 6 with all the back-to-back meetings doesn't really give space for anything creative. You cannot be creative in the 5 minutes you have in between your meetings. So I think this barrier between the personal and the, work needs to completely disappear, because we need to stop playing these games and, putting masks on when we go to office. And so we need to show up as our creative selves at work. And for the ones who, like myself, back in the day said in one of the interviews that I don't consider myself creative, because that's part of the education system that also needs to change. A lot of us grew up thinking, oh, this is not for me. I can admire it from afar, but I'm better in other things, So I ended up studying engineering. Now looking back, that was probably a very wrong choice for me. But, that's a different story for another day. So I think we need to create space. We need to put these days in the office, especially for people who work innovation, where there is nothing in calendar. We need to create physical spaces where the play is possible. We need to reconnect with our bodies. So anyone who wants to work in creative space needs to start engaging with the world through their senses, because we need to start to see the world. We talk about it, in our previous conversation. Surely, we need to see the world with this sense of curiosity again. If I meet you, am I curious about you? Am I curious about a plant that's in the office? Am I curious about my colleague? We need a sense of wonder and possibility back in the office. So I think for me, it's nurturing your creative practice at home, whatever that is, even if it's half an hour a day, doing some sort of body work, whether it's, yoga, meditation, whatever works for you, running, walking in nature, it's beautiful. I think it's spending time doing creative work within your team. So emptying the calendar and ensuring that there is just space for messiness. Let's approach the problem we have in the office, not with a position from, we need to solve it and there is a deadline, 5 p.m. today. No, we're just going to be curious about that problem, because often I find that we are so focused on solution that we never really truly engage with the problem in the right way. And then this is where the curiosity comes. If I'm curious, if I invite people who maybe don't know anything about that problem, I love that. I love to invite people who have not worked in that industry, or maybe artists or not even customers necessarily, but customers for sure, and see what they have to say. What kind of questions would they ask when they don't know anything about the topic? Because sometimes the knowledge we have is also a barrier, because that means we are already on this, path of we are working towards a solution, which means we are not really listening to the problem. We are not sensing the problem. I think working with senses is really important as well. Touching, feeling, smelling. This is how we connect back to the body. So, I like to ask my clients, what color is this? When we are sensing, how would it taste? How would it feel if it's salt? This is how we start to connect more. I love to do things when we are co-creating, where you start to work on a problem and it's always, in a kind of initially abstract way. And then someone else continues to work on that problem without any exchange, without you explaining what it is. And you see where the barriers are truly to co-creation. So there's all these little tools and things we can do to improve things. But I think creating space when we are not judging it by the efficiency KPIs, when we are just giving permission to people to be curious, to be playful, to learn how to co-create together, I think can lead to so much better results for the organization than being on this path of efficiency that's stifling everything.
Exactly. And I think that we kind of got a little bit trapped in that efficiency, productivity, agility, outcomes, result, too much focus on the outcome as well for me. Really takes that energy of creativity and playfulness, because if you're only problem solving and you're only focusing on the outcome, how are you going to improve that? You don't have that space for your creative self to show up fully.
No, because when you're on a problem solving, as I said, then you're on that agenda of, I think I already know. So, the whole, we will build it and they will come, comes from that. There is no curiosity in that. There is no asking. So the idea so far, the last 20 years, it's been with efficiency. Let's just solve it. Let's get something to market. It doesn't matter whether it's solving any problem, right? And I think as a result, we as customers are in confusion around, how to engage with everything that's being thrown at us, without any understanding that all these industries are now merging and that there is so much more overlap, and that as a result, we need to remove some of the walls that we have put in place and as a barrier to innovation. So be more focused on the problem, be curious about the problem, sit with problem. I often find that after a few sprints, you will find the real problem. Not necessarily a solution, but you will find a problem worth solving. And that's the point, right?
Yeah. And I love what you're saying, the problem worth solving. That's the whole thing. How do you contribute to humanity? What do you really offer back? And what is the problem that is worth solving for all of us to benefit from, right?
And there are plenty of problems around. I mean, definitely we don't have, shortage of problems or questions or issues that we are surrounded at. So if we can become a bit more curious about them, a bit more playful, definitely more open as well to work with people who are not necessarily from our industry, from our background, even from our organization, I think we can learn that there is much more that connect us, that we can learn much more from people who don't have, pedigree or degree or things in the CV that we think are right. Let's be a bit curious about who we invite to your organization. Let's stop hiring from the same industry, from the same background, from the same business school, because this is creating and perpetuating the problem that we are in.
Exactly. The diversity is so important. And, I remember, when I worked with the organization and there we did this fence wall, and they're keep on recreating the same problem because they're simply hiring the same mindset, same people, same organization.
We had that as well in every organization I worked. When I was at Pearson, we had this rule that we had to hire from education background. And that was a big problem because at the time, education wasn't disrupted enough. And so, of course, all these startups were then coming into our place and disrupting us. And big tech companies who had nothing to do with education, but who had that fresh perspective. So one of the things I like to do, especially with executives, I like to play this exercise where I get them to swap roles for a couple of hours. And they get to be, if they're CTO, they get to be a CPO or head of HR. And they start to look then at that department, at those objectives from a very different perspective. And the things they come up with is just incredible. It blows everyone's mind. And you're thinking, oh my God, this is what the fresh perspective, a bit of curiosity really can give you. So let's do more of that.
Yeah. And I want to kind of get into that playfulness in beginner's mind, because I think that curiosity of swapping those roles, the exercise you just described, for me also it comes from this notion of beginner's mind, when we're able to see fresh new perspective, right?
Yeah.
And you mentioned play. And I remember first time when I was in a workshop, I think it was nearly 15, 20 years ago, at a very serious leadership development workshop. And we came up with this concept, and now we would love to introduce the play. And I remember people looking at me with a horror and being so afraid because they felt so awkward, being worried that I'm now going to put them in some kind of uncomfortable situation when they would need to come out of their comfort zone and play. And then, at that time, I even felt, my God, this whole concept of play within the organizational cultures, it's so hijacked and people really feel worried. So where I would really love to go there, because you mentioned play and play, and people need to play. In order to be creative, they need to play. So how can somebody who is listening to this become a little bit more courageous and a little bit more stronger to begin facilitating and creating these environments when people can feel this playful energy once again? So from your perspective, what is necessary within the organizational context for organizations to become a little bit more playful, a little bit more childlike, a little bit more innocent in their approach, not so serious, not so rigid, but more able to
Well, it
facilitate?
starts with people, and especially the leadership team and executive team, because, most of employees, unfortunately, because of the toxic culture in which we operate, still require permission. So if we can get the executives and leadership team to show those skills and capabilities, to give permission, to be a bit more playful, less serious, to be a bit more humble as well in terms of inviting others to contribute instead of having this directive of, I know all the answers. I'm struggling to find a single executive that has all the answers right now, because I don't think we have the answers. So how can we approach the problem with a bit more curiosity ourselves? How can we play? And I always say to people, especially people who have kids, just play with your children. They can teach you things that we have forgotten, because we used to be those kids. We were that innocent. We were that curious. We had that beginner's mind. So give yourself permission not to know. I shared in our last talk, just this sentence of, I may be wrong, I may be wrong, I may be wrong. Repeat it 3 times before any meeting, before any workshop, before any brainstorm session. We don't have the results and we don't have the answers, and it's okay. Give yourself permission not to know. Because this is where the play and creativity and curiosity come together and produce beautiful results. But we need to, give ourselves a break. And we are on this pressure constantly to produce that the organization reinforces with insane deadlines and KPIs and all the wrong measurements, that there is no real space. And all the executives, all the leadership teams I have worked with are capable of that play. I often do workshops in which I break people into groups and we look at the business problem. I don't like to introduce play outside of a business context, because then it feels like a mimicky thing that we, have some fun for an hour or two, but they don't understand how to connect it then to the business thing. And then again, falls by the sideline. But if you look at any of the business problems you have, and you don't try to solve it by, discussing it and brainstorming in traditional way. And instead break people into groups, and one group can do theater and do a little improv or write a little short play with assigned roles. The other can write a piece of poetry. The third can do some visual art. Whatever you think of, you will be amazed at the results that would produce. And after that, with that energy of play, it's much easier to go in a more traditional, okay, now that we have had these beautiful, energetic and fun insights about ourselves, about where the defenses in us are that are preventing us from solving this in a different way, what are the collective, agreements that we have made that are also preventing us from creating something new, then we can go in a more serious brainstorm and workshop it in a more traditional way. But that for me is almost like a starting point. Unless you connect yourself, unless you're aware of where your barriers are, if you're not connected to that sense of play and curiosity and creativity, it's very hard to produce anything new. You're just on this perpetuate cycle or just repeating the same over and over and over.
Copying and pasting, repeating the same, copying and pasting. And it eventually gets boring for all of us, not only for the consumer, people. It does work.
Absolutely. Just look at even the creative industry, how very little new it's out there. Just, movies, music. We are repeating a lot because this is what the industry is requiring, or what the machinery that is saying this is profitable now in art. So you better, if you want to make money, need to adhere to those, KPIs. We have introduced the KPIs that are, driven only by monetary results to every sphere of our life. And this is why the solutions we are producing, I think COVID was such a beautiful example of there was a problem on a global level that we could have solved differently. And instead, we have gone back to this is how we operate. And it was a mess. It was a mess for 2 years with the consequences that we are still living and that we are going to live for a very long time when it comes to our sense of loneliness, our sense of connection to our communities, our sense of self, sense of well-being. We will see, even when these new generations come up that were really affected to their childhood or early teen years, what the effect of COVID was. But that was the moment for us to say, this is a unique challenge and we need to approach it differently and not to try and cram the old solutions into it.
I completely agree. That was one of the pivotal moments that we have been used in the most beautiful way to overcome. Now, my very last question that a lot of people are wondering about, and people keep on asking me this question. This is the reason why I want to ask you, kind of diverting into a different field right now that I don't want to open fully, but I really need to ask, is that a lot of the people nowadays are kind of a little bit worried about the appearance of the AI and the impact of the AI on creativity. A lot of the organizations right now, some of the organizations even forbid the usage of AI because they feel that people are copying and pasting and asking AI everything, and they're not really engaging creatively. They're not creating the space to think, to feel, to play, to experiment. But because of this addiction to performance and efficiency, they would much rather outsource even the creative challenges to the AI to give them the solution for. And a lot of people are sometimes worried that this emergence of the AI is going to stifle our creative soul going forward. So for the people who are listening, I'm just curious about your perspective. Yeah, we cannot resolve this. I just want to open that field because I think it's an important one at this juncture of our human evolution. What is your take on it? Do you feel there is the danger? Do you feel that we can use AI in a different way to enable us to be more creative? Do you feel we need to let go of the AI altogether? How do you approach this in your work, in your life, with your children?
I think I'm personally mostly staying out of it because I'm more focused on art and creativity and inner work and much less on technology because, as I said, I think this is where I see and feel we really need to invest our time and energy. I think there is place for AI. I don't think that we have, the agreement or understanding where that space is, and that is worrisome. I don't think AI is sophisticated enough and may not be sophisticated enough in our lifetime to replace creative activities. And I don't think it should. I think it should replace some of the boring stuff, right? The stuff that we don't really need to engage in, that is soul destroying with so many people who are on this treadmill of repeating the same old, and give space and time for people in a workplace to do the things you and I have been discussing on the call. So outsource the mundane task to AI and give employees time and space to play, to be creative, to create new products, services, to really understand, to get to the bottom of what problems do we need to solve as organization, who we are as organization, who am I as an employee of that organization or leader of that organization, how do we want to contribute to the world in a better way? AI is not going to solve the problems we have. We need to step up and do the work that is required for that to happen. AI can be a wonderful tool that facilitates some of that journey, but cannot do our job for us. And if you think it can, then I'm more worried for humanity.
So, no, I wanted us to share this because a lot of people, some people think it can. So I'm with you. I think it's a tool. I think it can support creating more space for all of us to be creative by outsourcing boring, mundane, everyday tasks that everybody needs.
It's not going to produce, original symphony. It's not going to become a new Beethoven or a new Picasso. It's not on the cards. And we need more of that. We need more original art, original ideas, original outlook on the world where there is a better sense of hope and possibility, better connections as well, because we didn't have time to talk about it, but we are very disconnected at the moment from ourselves, from each other, from the sense of hope and possibility. So I think this is where our efforts need to go.
Yeah. And I'm with you because, I think it's much more important for all of us to engage in our own creative arts. When you talked about, a lot of the people in the organization, they have hobbies, they have artistic expression, but they're not bringing this back into work because there is no space. I think it's very important for us to keep on bringing that back and to engage in our own creative crafts and arts and ability to become creative, to begin seeing ourselves as a creative people. Because a lot of the time, as you know this really well, you ask people, are you creative? They say, no, I'm not. I'm really boring. Creative people are, wow, they can,
Exactly. And it's not true. And I think that's one of the big barriers. I've seen people in my workshops who are scared to try, to even, put a little bit of paint on a canvas or to add to someone else's work. So it's beautiful how through these simple exercises, you can learn a lot about someone's personality, about how they are really as a team player or not, how open they are to new ideas. My teacher, Margaret Wheatley, asked me this question years ago. She said, what are you defending? Right? And this is the question I ask myself every time I feel a trigger come up in me. What am I defending? What part of my story am I defending now that's preventing me from being curious, from approaching this problem differently, from listening to you and seeing that maybe you have a different perspective? That's creativity as well, right? How we listen, how we speak to each other, how much space do we give? Are we listening just to, then jump in straight in and finish our point? Or are we really curious about what is the possibility of someone new coming to the team, offering a fresh idea? Can we be playful around that? Can we, work together to maybe explore a different solution that, we were not even aware before? As I said, art kind of blew my mind because I came from engineering background. I work in corporate. When I started to paint, literally blew the roof of the house. I was like, I couldn't imagine that this is possible. And now I can't imagine that I ever lived differently. So it just shows that it's that potential, it's in all of us. I'm not special, I'm not this famous artist that spent the whole, life working in art. It's just something new I'm exploring. I'm having so much fun doing that. And as a result, as I said, everything else is shifting in my life. And I think if we do that collectively, then there is a lot of hope and possibility for what we can jointly create.
Yeah. So this is a strong invitation for all of you. I think that, just to kind of end up this podcast, we talked about AI, which is always the big elephant in the room when it comes to creativity for a lot of people. A lot of people are doing the AI images, they're writing poems to their loved ones, they are consistently within the AI domain. And both Sonja and I believe this is useful, but we need to go back into the real connection to ourselves, to others, to join the dots back together and to show up creatively in our life.
And I also want ourselves, there is a point, because you mentioned a poem. When you outsource that task to an AI, you're not risking yourself. You're not risking yourself emotionally. You're not opening your heart. Because the result of that could be that you're crushed and that poem is not received in a way, right? So by outsourcing it to a machine, we are also outsourcing, well, it's not personal anymore. It didn't come from me, so I'm not risking myself. So if I'm rejected, it's not a big deal.
So big deal. So,
and I think this is a big barrier to who we are, to how we engage with each other, to our sense of possibility creation, because it's all about risking ourselves. Who we think we are has to go in order for us to change, for the system to change, for us to create something else.
So Sonja and I were going to continue recording for next 100 hours because we can talk a lot. But I'm aware that our listeners are listening. So I would love to bring this into completion. Thank you so much, Sonja, for all the wonderful personal wisdom that you shared with us today. Thank you so much for the listeners who are joining in and supporting this podcast and learning. I think this was one of this elevation. We always say to come to TNM Coaching Unplugged to elevate your consciousness, to elevate your heart, to open up to the new perspective. And I really hope this was a wonderful opening of a new perspective for you. So, Sonja, anything else that you would love to share just to feel complete? And how would you love to leave audience after this conversation
I
with
think
me?
I would just love to encourage people to take some time out for themselves, time in which they can heal and be silent until they feel those creative juices, really pushing them to create something. And just risk yourself in every connection, in any interaction. And I think we can all together create a much better place for all of us. Thank you for having me today.
Thank you so much for joining. Thank you so much for your wisdom. Everybody else, thank you so much for listening. Thank you so much for being with us. Lots of love to everybody and enjoy the rest of your day.